Ladies and gentlemen, over to Dr. Srinivas Chunduru, the founder of VMentor.ai.
I'll use it. Yeah. Good evening. Am I audible? Yeah? Can you raise your hands if I'm audible? I want to make sure everybody is awake since it's almost the last session that Lawrence gave me, so I want to make sure all of you are awake. You know, most of you are HR professionals and HR tech professionals. Whenever I meet a set of HR people, I ask them two questions. In every session that I do with HR professionals, these are the only two questions I start with, I end with. So I want to start with that question and then request my colleague to change the slides. Question number one is, are you a 3 a.m. friend of your CEO? 3 a.m. friend is somebody, if he or she is in a crisis, you would call. I'm sure each one of us have a 3 a.m. friend where we would say, you know, I'm not feeling well, I'm not myself, I'm feeling blah, blah, whoever that could be. Are you as HR a 3 a.m. friend of your business? Hand on heart, answer is no for 95% of the HR professionals, probably 5% yes. And most often in most of the organizations, the 3 a.m. friend of business is finance. Not because they give money, there are reasons. The second question I have, I'll say in Hindi and translate that in English, can confidently each of the HR person answer this question, dhande mein paisa kidhar hai? Where is the money in the business? What are the drivers of cost? What are the drivers of profit? Probably 50% of us can, 50% cannot. My own feeling is the whole journey of HR moving from grassroots level going up to CHRO level and partnering with the business is actually answering these two questions, nothing beyond. So indeed an honor that we have signed an MOU and partnered with Retailer Association in our quest to answer these two questions. Quickly, my background, I'm an accidental CHRO, not by design, it happened. I'm an engineer, MBA in finance, started my career in sales, moved to corporate finance, then became CHRO of one of the 16,000 people company, $8 billion revenue. Then I became CEO of the financial service. Coincidentally, all my 5 positions was in the same company. So it's interesting that I was CFO as well as CHRO in the same company in one sequence to another sequence. In a lighter sense, when I became CFO to CHRO, many people actually said that it is like Akshay Kumar playing a Shyam Benegal role. Akshay Kumar is known for his dynamism and front foot, and Shyam Benegal is known for art movie. I had some of the colleagues coming to me and telling me that Ramji ka vanvas start ho gaya hai, so you have gone to HR. I mean, perception-wise I'm talking about. But hand on heart, I would not have become CEO of that company without being into HR, because that was the only role where I had to influence people without authority, use all the business things in a very practical fashion. So I owe my career success in the company to HR. 2019, I quit, and along with my co-founder, Meenu, who is standing over there, who unlike me is a genuine HR person, 20 years of work experience in companies like Godrej and Piramal, we co-founded this company called VMentor.ai. And one of the objectives, while we work in multiple areas, we work with 60 companies, and some of you are my customers, and I could see a couple of familiar faces. One of the objectives personally I have and we have is, how can 10% of board of India be HR professionals? Hard answer is today less than 1% of them are board members or CEO. How can we move it to 10%? While we work in multiple areas, but this is one passion that we carry, and we started this company. And thanks to Lawrence, we have started this alliance, and we would now talk about different things that we would like to do on the alliance. Next, please. When I look from the eyes of a CEO, I'm not talking as an HR, I'm very proud HR person standing in front of you. But when I look from an eye of CEO, any of the CEOs that one talks about, and we have spoken to 100 plus business people, 1,000 plus HR people working in the areas of retail, and a lot of secondary research to talk what we are talking about. I think at this point of time, every retail CEO in India, okay, in his mind, there is his or her mind, there is one picture which is going on, and I want to just depict that picture. A perfect storm. Probably every CEO who is managing retail, any omnipresent e-commerce company, and several of them we have worked with, is essentially saying we are in a perfect world where there is a perfect storm and so many moving parts to talk about. The first moving part is how do I make this organization omnipresent? Not just in terms of technology, strategy, how do I make people adopt? Is it easy for a person working in a traditional retail to accept e-commerce, to accept mobile commerce, to accept different forms of commerce to talk about? I think that's the big struggle that many of the CEOs are thinking about, that how do I significantly be an omnipresent company? Next. Sustainability, easier said than done. Not many people understand that. How does it become a DNA of an organization to say so? I don't think sustainability is HR's responsibility or HSC's responsibility. It's a cultural nuance of an organization. And you can smell in an organization where sustainability is DNA of the organization. CEO is thinking all the time that my young customer is saying, I would prefer to buy from a retailer who is more sustainable or adopts more sustainability. How do I make sure that I have 4 lakh employees, 2 lakh employees, 50,000 employees, that sustainability is a natural instinct and culture of the organization? The third challenge is digitalization. I don't even mean social commerce, I am not even referring to mobile commerce, social commerce, and a host of those things. But very basic things like, how do I use IoT, BOTs? How do I adopt some of these things? Anand has wonderfully spoken about an important aspect. How do you co-create, right? So therefore, how do I build an organization which is doing all of this? Next, please. Productivity, be it same stores, inventory turnover ratio, or be it return on capital employed, be it productivity per person per month sales, or sales per square feet. How do I enhance disproportionately from that perspective? Yeah. Growth of an organization. How do I manage attrition? Hand on heart, we all know the data is 40% to 100% of attrition in many of the frontline positions, at senior positions, etc. One of the companies we work with, HR has an attrition of 80%, right? So imagine the attrition across the organization to talk about. So when I talk about growth, how is the business growing? GDP is growing at 6-7%. How can we grow at 35%? Retail being a core sector normally grows at 2x times. How will it grow 5x times? This talks about how unorganized sector, which is 90% and organized is 10%, how can 10 become 25% in that sense, right? How do we grow without burning a lot more resources from that perspective to say so? How do we make retail, which is considered not so profitable, into one of the most profitable organizations? And the last worry that the CEO is going through is future skills. When I talk about future skills, I was just jotting down. It's not just about technology. I'm sure from the morning or otherwise in the organizations, many of them have made wonderful efforts in terms of artificial intelligence, machine learning, digital transformation, etc. But I think some of the future skills are around program management. How do you do agile program management? How do you adopt robotics and blockchain, big data, data visualization? While these are all hard skill and probably little more concrete, and there's some efforts going on, and in some form or fashion we are all adopting it, I think as HR, we have to be cognizant of the fact that unless we have a bedrock, solid foundation of few of the cultural nuances, the tools are as good as they can be, but not useful in that sense to say so. What do I mean? Do we understand design thinking as an organization? I think previously Anand from Reliance has spoken very nicely about it, which means if you walk into an organization, do people uniformly understand what is design thinking? Is it part of the lingo of the organization? Is it part of the way of working of the organization? Be it innovation, design thinking. It's a soft skill. Unless that is institutionalized across the organization, any amount of tools is theoretical in nature to say so. Social and emotional intelligence. Across the organization, do people have that kind of an acceptance, have that kind of a maturity? If you don't build, it is garbage in, garbage out, which means to say that wonderful product built up, but we do not have an organization maturity to absorb that. Problem-solving skills. Now, every day in retail, in real time, so many open-ended things are there. How do you build that organization which is problem-solving driven? One of the retail companies I was talking to, which is actually a startup company which went into retail and one of $1 billion valuation company, they made sure that the culture in the organization is data-driven. Every person standing on the shop floor of the organization goes through an analytics test, goes through an analytics training. The whole lingo is all about data-driven conversations, to say so. Now, it took them 6-8 years to build that kind of a culture. So unless you create that kind of a culture, whatever we do is theoretical. What I wanted to depict is, when we spoke to multiple people, I think these are the 6 major business issues which would determine the future of retail in some form or shape, in that sense, to say so. Every CEO we spoke to, in some form or shape, told us that these are the 6 worries that they have. That's why we called it perfect storm. Next, please. I would like to quickly get your views. Why don't you quickly scan this? Or if you're unable to scan, please click https www.menti.com and use this Mentimeter code to put your perspective to say that what are dominant gaps that you have seen in the business. I've talked about 6. I may have spoken to 10%, 5% of the universe. You are on the ground working. Either use this link or either use this QR code. I'll give a couple of minutes for you to react. People behind, if you're unable to scan it, please use this URL, www.menti.com, prefixed by https:// and use the Mentimeter code to put your perspective. I wanted to grasp your perspective. Another 60 seconds for you to do that. All right, Shloka, just go and click on the link and let's see some responses. Shloka, can I have the responses, please? Awesome. 46 responses. Wonderful. So I guess the cloud map or heat map is all about future prediction, which is, again, in the world of uncertainty, how do you do? Talked about bedrock, solid foundation like collaboration, internal customers, how do you manage attrition, talk about culture of an organization from an encouragement perspective, process adherence, how do we develop the strategic approach, how do we develop empathy, adaptability to changes, agile methodology, think of how do you link to data, how training can be really effective, ROI perspective to say so. How do we get real-time data to find out compensation benchmarking? How do you create an organization which is, proactive in their approach? Employee turnover has been spoken about. So if I look at this, and I had looked at it just now because you have just given these pointers, I think there are 3 or 4 categories. 1, HR's responsibility as an organization building the culture is to essentially create a bedrock culture, which is built around teamwork, understanding customer, planning, etc. The second part is how do you adopt future skills? Future skills in terms of ability to look at data, ability to look at more work, ability to look at if I were to say inventory, ability to look at forecasting, planning, etc. The third thing that I'm also looking at over here is how can we be data-driven in terms of our decision-making, in terms of salary breakup, in terms of business know-how, host of those things. The fourth element, what I'm hearing here is, how do we understand business to add value to the organization? So essentially, we are saying it's a combination of left brain and right brain that each of the HR people needs to, to inculcate to create a real impact in the organization. Thank you so much. 50 plus people have actually given me this. Can we move to the presentation? Yeah. Thank you for that. All right. Now, when we spoke to 200 plus retail professionals, for want of better word, non-HR people, because as an organization, we believe in first principle, which means when we go to a customer, we tell them in the first sentence, we know nothing about your business, allow us to speak to people. So we use all the first principles for finding out. We spoke to 200 plus retail professionals. That's where I understood that buying and merchandising and sourcing and visual merchandising are different in that sense. Earlier, I did not know about it. 1,000 plus HR professionals that we have spoken to, both L&D professionals as well as BHRs. A lot of secondary research. I think the whole world of retail, as I see, is into 4 parts. Part number 1, I think consumer is changing. Consumer is essentially saying that I have more money power. The population of the people who are becoming customer for the organized retail is substantially higher in that sense, to say so. And as my income is increasing, my disposable income is increasing, it is not anymore nice to have things, must have things, and I would prefer, being Gen Z as well as earning much more money, I would prefer organizations which are following the triple P bottom line. That's a very important aspect, including planet, profit, people. I think that's what is being spoken about in that sense, especially retail today is more of a lifestyle business, and any of the 3 Ps being violated, I think people are jittery about that, and I think that's the first finding we had. Second, therefore, from a retailer perspective, I think important is how do I reshuffle my infrastructure, how much of e-tailing I should create, how much of mobile commerce, what formats of store should I do that, what thumb rules should I use for that, so on and so forth. I think extremely important that how do I refine my unit economics, and the standard methods of unit economics have gone. Optimizing operations, how do I do, and customer retention. Here, only point I'm trying to say is that customer will pay you what the market can give you, and therefore your cost is not what you want it to be. What customer can pay minus profit is your cost, and retail has to mold itself accordingly. Third one, there is going to be a digital revolution, which means to say that it has become much more easier for people to access different types of technology to do that. And the fourth one, sustainability rocks and surges, which means sustainability is no more a choice, and it's not just an annual report item, or it's not just spoken in a town hall, but unless sustainability is felt and seen by people, I think the awareness is going to have a huge impact on retail. So all I'm trying to say is that whatever we did in the last 40 years of retail, 30 years is not going to work. We are getting into an areas where we don't know what we don't know, like adoption of technology, sustainability, etc. Third, customer is really becoming a king, and the size of the king is becoming to an emperor, and therefore, a lot of imperatives for us from a business perspective. And therefore, if these are the trends, what is CEO worrying about? Next slide. 5 things, quickly click. All 5 you click. I think CEO is worried about omni-channel excellence, customer engagement insights, data-driven decision-making, supply chain mastery, and business acumen. CEO wants everybody to understand the 12 parameters of retail. He or she wants to understand that how do you measure productivity. He or she wants to know how do you compute ROI. He or she wants to know what is the cost of attrition. Again, I'm using this language, which I use in my trainings, is essentially that the problem why HR is unable to connect with business or limited connect is business is talking Chinese. We are talking Hindi, English, Marathi, Tamil, Telugu, whatever languages we have. Nothing wrong. Chinese is also a good language. These are also good language, but we don't talk the common language. Either we learn Chinese, which we should, and also teach business to learn the regional language. I think that's where HR's role is important. And if I look at hand on heart, and when we spoke to CEOs, I think these are 5 things that the CEOs are worried about. And our own belief, and that's where we tied up with RAI, and this is what we are going to do, is if this is the business agenda, I don't think HR should have any parallel agenda. HR's agenda should start from here. Next, please. If you really want to be a 3 a.m. friend of business, I think HR in retail in today's world should have a 5-point agenda. All 5 please kick from a time perspective. Democratizing future skills. When I say democratizing, what does it mean? Does every person in the organization knows as much as he or she is supposed to know about it? We talk of AI/ML. If 5% of the organization is aware of it, doesn't really help. We talk about sustainability. If the security guard who is at the entrance of your company going up to the CEO, don't use it as a daily lingo, don't use it as a daily practice, whatever we do is theoretical in nature to say so. Companies, even the big ones, have struggled in so-called democratizing of future skills to say so. They would have access to a lot of things, a lot of intelligence, a lot of tools, but it's a cultural nuance. When you have to democratize a few things, it's a cultural nuance to talk about. I'm sure some of the customer companies of ours and many of you must have democratized values, must have democratized vision, must have democratized mission, right? 50%, 70%, 80% must be the effectiveness. How do you similarly democratize? What's the methodology of doing it? How do you make it sustainable? I think that's the first skill, should be the agenda of HR. Second skill is data-driven. How do we make sure that the conversations that we have is concrete enough for a business to show interest with us, is uniformly understood by different set of the people in the organization, so that there is credibility to what we are talking and it's not a soft, goody things that we are talking about. Third, extremely important, is deep functional knowledge. Does HR understand all the elements of HR? Does HR understand how ESOPs are structured in a listed company versus an unlisted companies? Does HR, understand union budget and impact on, the compensation structures? Does HR understand, in real sense, ROI of L&D? Does HR understand role of HRBP? Does HR understand cost of attrition? All I'm trying to say is that deep functional knowledge. Now, whatever I talked about HR holds good for finance, would hold good for IT, would hold good for B&M, buying and merchandising, would hold good for sourcing. One of the things, unfortunately, what happens in the world of corporate is as we keep growing, with the experience that we are growing, we kind of forget what as a student we used to do, which is constant upgradation that we need to do in our own areas to talk about. So therefore, I think today, having a deep functional academy as an organization is not a matter of choice, but it is mandatory in that sense to say so. Because if you have decent set of HR, they are outdated after a point of time. While it's not a direct relevant example of HR, let me just give you. I have reasons to believe I understand finance reasonably well, right? I've worked in that area, I have interest on that, I've done my PhD on that, so reasonable reason to believe that I'm okay in finance. When I studied as a student, there was no future and options in the market. I studied 25 years back, which means my knowledge is zero. If I continued with my laurels of being a gold medalist and knowing what I know about it, I would have been completely outdated because today 60% of stock markets are about future and options. Similarly in HR, the shelf life is just 5 years for any one of us, including me. 5 years for any one of us, unless we upgrade. So functional academy through a structure, and it's not about two people coming and doing a guest lecture or somebody sharing best practices, a structural method of almost like university in the organization. How do we do assessments? How do we do some self-reading? How do we make sure there are classroom sessions? How do we make sure there are some business impact projects? Makes all the difference. Fourth is business-focused workforce. How many of us sitting in this room can confidently stand here and say that how is return on capital employed computed and how is return on capital employed driven? And what are the 5 mantras for doing it? Because CEO is saying my KRA with your board of Reliance Retail is to enhance ROC. If I don't know what my ROC is and the depth of it, how am I going to drive that? Do I really know that 20 things that I'm driving as HR, is it connected, not connected? So all I'm trying to say is that every function needs to talk about business. The last model which we feel strongly is recruit, train, and deploy, which means, I'll give you one data point of one of the retail companies we were working. It takes 7 days to train and keep ready your frontline staff, okay? That means somebody who is not from the industry, probably 12th grade passed or whatever, you bring him as 20 years old boy or a girl, you bring him as a floor salesperson, it takes 7 days of induction, and this is real data I'm talking about of a retail company. After the 7 days, when the frontline was asked how was this training and induction, they rated 4.3 on scale of 5. For a minute, take it from me that it is statistically significant because the quantity was higher. Okay, and this company is marked with 60% attrition, so data I'm talking about is pretty large in that sense. Which means, safe to say, induction was very good. People understand product, people understand customer, people understand pricing, people understand customer service, because 4.3 on 5 is pretty decent on that scale. After 30 days, the business heads, as in the floor managers and the store managers, etc., after 30 days were asked to rate these people on their readiness for the job. No points for guessing, 3.1 on scale of 5 was the rating. And basically, most of the floor managers told us, even if they did not do induction, this level would have been similar. I don't find any usefulness of whatever training has been done. I have wasted time. Now just imagine, 7 days, even if you're taking a 25,000 rupees salary or 20,000 on an average, and on a mass scale that you're talking about, is actually worth few crores in that sense, to say so. How can I make sure that when somebody is coming in, he's 50% baked, 70% baked? This problem gets multiplied when you hire freshers. Some of the FMCG companies and some of the retail companies hire 1,000 freshers, 500 freshers, 300 graduates, MBAs. Retail itself is not a very structured course in that sense in many of the universities and college. Some side diplomas, people keep doing it. Now imagine their own concepts of marketing, sales itself is little bleak. Added to that, if you add a retail angle, it is much more bleaker, practicality much more bleaker. How do we create a program in such a way that by the time they come from campus and start working with you, there is some bit of readiness? IT industry did in the past, banking industry did in the past. I think time for retail to do. So all I'm trying to say before I go to the last slide, and there is 3 minutes and I'll finish before that, is HR agenda has to be driven from where CEO stops thinking on the people front. CEO's agenda has to be from the macro environment and the trend that one is talking about. And therefore, if this connectivity is deeper, if not 3 a.m. friend, 12 p.m. friend, surely, 12 a.m. friend, surely one can become in that sense slowly, stepwise. And I think the whole tie-up that we have with Retailer Association of India is essentially to drive this through different programs or interventions for all the retailers in that sense, to say. While we are not a specialist organization in retail in that sense, it so happens that we, by design, our largest customers became retailers, and probably 30% of our business comes from retail in that sense, to say. So the idea of this tie-up is, can we help our HR friends to drive all of this in their organizations so that the organizations move to the next level? I think that's the whole tie-up about. Yeah, next slide. I think as somebody in my early days in the college used to tell me, cabbage goes to a college and becomes a cauliflower, which means band gobi becomes open. I think the whole game is all about, with Retailer Association, is that whichever company that we are working with, people that we are working with, can we just start with understanding what is the dynamics of the business, slowly interlink that, and this learning is not like a classroom, but a natural process. And again, I'm quoting what our friend from Reliance has said, it is not about adoption. If you co-create, it is never an adoption. So the attempt is to create these kind of academies. We already work with some of the companies. Yeah, next. 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 Yeah, this is one small case study that we are talking about, one of the companies that we are working with. 3,000 odd HR people that we are working with, 894 of them have gone through a structured academy for HR to move to the next level. In another company, we are working on sales. In another company, we are working on B&M. Idea is, how can we have a specialized mini universities imbibed into your day-to-day life, which is not just theoretical in nature, but you actually land up doing certain interesting projects, to say so. So this was one of the case studies, which is a live case study that I'm talking about, where a few hundreds and thousands of people, if I remember, some 19,000 of learning that has happened. It works like a machine in that sense, to say so. I think our humble attempt through this tie-up is to co-create something in retail which would make India proud, which would make each of you proud. Yeah? Thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you for that.